Hello everyone, welcome. I'm so glad you're joining me today. I'm going to be creating a floral card using the clear stamp and die of the month from Spellbinders. This month, the set is called Perfect Floral Bloom, and it includes a lot of beautiful floral images. If you want the stamp set on its own, you can do that, or there's a club that includes all of the dies. And I really love having the dies for my sets. So this set was a little bit daunting at first. I didn't know which flower went to which stem, and there are so many images. But it really is a charming little set. Lots of pretty flowers and leaves. I'll create my card project first, and I'll show you how I used these stamps and dies. And then at the end of this video, I'll stamp out every single image for you so you can kind of have a guide or a key for how these layering stamps work together. I'm using a piece of indigo cardstock. This is a beautiful new cardstock from Spellbinders. And I'm going to be cutting out all of my dies first before I stamp them. I have a little piece of scrap white cardstock that I added some dot liner to. And this is just going to help me hold all of these pieces in place while I do the stamping. So they're already die cut. I'll peel off the dies, and I'm just going to keep the die cuts in place. I'm just carefully taking off the tape and the die, and if it does come out, I can just stick it back in place. For this card, I'm going to be stamping out my images with some clear ink, some Versamark ink, and using some embossing powder over them. So here are all of my die cuts taped down to the piece of white cardstock. My next step is to put this in my Mini Misty, and then I can start stamping out my images. I'm going to line up the stamps over the die cuts. I'm just going to pull them all out and tentatively set them in place at first, and then you kind of have to look over them to align them to the die cuts perfectly. And I'm stamping out the floral images first so that I can stamp the greenery over them and you can see the stems on the flowers. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'll show you what I'm going to do here in just a moment. I'm using some anti-static powder all over this piece of cardstock. And then I'm going to ink them up with the Versamark ink. And I always like to ink them up twice. I'll just get this piece of tape out of the way. There we go. Then I can just press the ink into the paper. And it should stay in place because of the dot liner behind it. And then I'll ink it up a second time. Next, we're going to add the embossing powder. I have some really fun embossing powders. These are from Ranger, and they're great embossing powders for dark cardstock because they show through really well. I'll have the links to all of these embossing powders in the description box, but I'm using Peony Pink. And then this is Geranium Red. And you can see how bright and vibrant they are on this dark cardstock. I allowed my heat tool to warm up for a minute, and I can melt this embossing powder. I have links for these powders from Amazon as well as scrapbook.com. A lot of them aren't available anymore, so I've included all that I could find that were still available, and then a few extra colors that I don't have in my stash yet, but that were the same brand. And the brand is, like I said, Ranger, but they're from Wendy Vici. I hope I'm saying that right, Wendy Vici. And now for the second layer of the stamps. I'm adding the little centers and the stems. And like I said, I wanted to stamp out the blooms first so that the green stems can show through. And it's hard to see the die cuts again because of this dark paper I'm using. but I'm just kind of putting them in place at first, and then I am going to look over the stamps just to make sure they're perfectly aligned to my die cuts. Okay, I'm going to use some more anti-static powder. And then this time I'm going to use a green embossing powder. This one is called Leaf Green, and it's just a really bright, pretty green. I'll ink them up twice. And they layer up beautifully. I didn't have any problems with melting the ink a second time. Okay, so let's add a green leaf to the stems and leaves. I'm just catching it with a piece of type paper. For the centers on my two flowers, I'm going to use gold, but I'll go ahead and melt the green embossing powder first. These are such beautifully drawn flowers. I love this one that I'm melting here. They look like little hearts on either side. That would be great for Valentine's Day. Okay, so let's ink up the centers just one more time. And then I'll pour over some gold embossing powder. This gold embossing powder I picked up at, what was it? Michael's. And is called Reflections. It's a beautiful gold. Okay, so let's melt this. Some of these images have a third layer to them. So I'm going to add the leaves or the third layer. This one at the top right, and I'm going to add gold leaves. So I'll pour over some more of the gold embossing powder. So Desiree from the YouTube channel Include a Thank You highly recommended this gold embossing powder, so I had to pick some up, and she is right. It's just stunning. So let's melt this. And then I will clean up my desk off camera, and I'll start popping these out of the negative space. But isn't that pretty? Let me pull out a piece of white cardstock just so you can see how beautiful the dark edges around these pieces are. I thought it would be fun to have them outlined with the blue cardstock, and I just love how it turned out. Just something a little different, and then it adds, the embossing powder adds some texture and shimmer to the card. Okay, now they are ready to put on a card. The largest flower has a little bald patch there, but I'm going to cover it up with the smaller flower, so that will be hidden. I'm using a piece of pink sand cardstock, and I'll attach this to a white card base. This will mat my piece of indigo blue cardstock. I'll have a few mats on this card, and this is the standard A2 sized card, which is 5.5 by 4.25. My next cardstock is called Dune, and it's one of the new ones. I used a rectangle die on this piece of cardstock from Spellbinders. It's called Fluted Classics Rectangles, and it just adds a pretty design around the edges. Before I start attaching my flowers, however, I am going to stamp out my sentiment. This is going to be a thank you card, so I will stamp it out with some Versamark ink. I'll do this again twice. I want the sentiment to be red, so I'm going to use the geranium red embossing powder. And this is going to match perfectly with the flowers that I stamped out. So let's pour over some more of the red. And these are very pretty, dainty sentiment stamps. And the red just pops off of this craft cardstock. Let's go ahead and melt this. Then I'm going to use plenty of dot liner behind this. so that my warped panel will sit flat on the indigo cardstock. It did warp a little bit with my embossing. But that's all right. The dot liner holds it down so it's pretty flat. Now I can start building my bouquet. The two flowers here, I'm going to use some foam squares just to pop these up a little bit from the rest of the images. I'll put the largest flower down first, and then the second flower will hide that little imperfection there. And then I'll use liquid glue to attach everything else. But isn't that pretty how the indigo blue cardstock around my images just pops off of that dune cardstock? This card will have a lot of empty space on it, but I just love how it looks. And you can just focus on the pretty bouquet at the bottom corner. I did go ahead and stamp out one more image, this fern image that I'll glue down last. I did that off camera. I thought it just needed something more. I'm going to add some red gems around my bouquet. These just matched perfectly with the red geranium embossing powder. And this adds a fun touch of sparkle. And here is a close-up look. The pink sand cardstock matched really well with the pink peony embossing powder too, and I really liked that touch. Next, let me show you all of the dies and where they belong on this stamp set. Hopefully this will help you out a little bit. And I'm going to stamp out a key for you. So normally if this was going to go on a card, I would die cut my pieces first just because it's easier to line them up with the stamps that way. But for the sake of showing you which stamps go together, I'm just going to stamp them out on this piece of white cardstock. I'm using some positively saturated inks from Simon Says Stamp. I just love these inks. They're so pretty, and there's so many different shades of greens and pinks and oranges and blues. I don't have all of the sets yet, but I am slowly collecting them. Okay, so this is the second layering stamp for this stem image. And then you'll see that there are two stems left, and it goes with these leaves right here. And sometimes, again, you have to look over it to line it up perfectly. Okay, the next stem is this three-pronged stem. And this one is really cute. It stamps out these berries. So I'll stamp out the berries with some pink ink. At the end of my stamping, I put the die cuts over these just to see how closely I came to lining them up perfectly. And I didn't do too bad, but again, I would die cut them out first. Okay, here's another stem. And this one, I'll stamp with the lighter green. This one is fun because it has two leaves on either side. I'll stamp the leaves out next. I'll use a dark green for the leaves. And then in the center, it's meant to go with this little flower right here. And I'll stamp this out with the really light pink ink. And there we go. There are a lot of stems and leaves in this set. And of course, if you don't want to die cut these, if you're just stamping them directly on your card front, then you don't have to worry about lining them up perfectly. So this one's really cute. It just has three little leaves. I'm going to stamp them out with pink. Okay, now we're getting to the single stem. And this you can do two ways. So I'm going to stamp it out twice. And then I'll stamp it with the tulip, and this one will fit the die. But it also looks really cute with this other little flower that we used before. And I'll just stamp it out like that. Next, we'll stamp out this little sprig of leaves. And it goes with this next image, and it stamps out veins for each leaf. I like that one, it's so pretty. Next is another stem, and this one goes with some more leaves. And I'll just stamp these out with some pink. At first I wasn't sure how this one went, but I'll twist it around until I get it right. There we go. Okay, now for the big flowers. I'll stamp out the big one, and then it has a center. And of course, you can mix and match the centers to these flowers. I'll just stamp it out with a dark green so you can really see it. And here's the smaller flower. And it comes with a smaller center. I'll stamp this out with a darker pink. And here is even another little flower image. And it has a teeny tiny center, and I'll stamp that out with green. Okay, I almost forgot one of the images, so I'm going to stamp that out last. It comes with this curved stem. And these look like I said before, they look like little hearts. I think it's so cute. Okay, so here is the key for all of the images. Let me flip it right side up. Here we go. And this is what they all look like. I didn't stamp out all of the sentiments. You do get a few sentiments in this set. And then you can die cut them with the coordinating dies if you want that. But I'm just kind of setting these on top just to give you an idea of which dies go to which flowers. Once you start playing with your stamp set, you'll find that it's not daunting at all, and it's a rather clever little set. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you got some fun inspiration on how to use the Clear Stamp and Die of the Month set for August. And again, it's called Perfect Floral Bloom. Take care, everyone. I'll be back again soon with another video. Bye!